The jungle of Viralia was never silent. Every branch creaked like it was alive. Every gust of wind carried whispers that did not belong to humans. Ethan Ward woke up to that strange sound, his head throbbing, his body aching from the crash. The air was thick, glowing faintly green from the plants that pulsed like veins in the dark. He tried to move but found cold metal around his wrists. He was trapped inside a huge cage made of glass and steel. Outside the bars stood tall alien figures, their faces hidden behind smooth helmets that reflected light like mirrors. They spoke in a language that clicked and hissed. Ethan caught only one word that sounded almost human. Experiment. He tried to stand, but pain shot through his leg. His uniform was torn, his weapon gone. He looked around the cage and froze. Someone or something was crouched in the shadows. A low growl echoed through the silence. The shape moved closer, and the dim light revealed an alien girl. She had glowing amber eyes that shimmered like fire. Her skin was pale silver, covered in faint markings that looked like scars from chains. Her long black hair was tangled, and she moved like a wild animal. She was not wearing armor, only simple fabric that looked torn and dirty. Ethan's breath caught as she bared sharp teeth and hissed at him. She was bound by a collar connected to the wall, but her muscles tensed like she was ready to strike. The guards outside laughed. One of them said something that made the others chuckle. Ethan did not need to understand the language to know what they meant. He was meant to die here. One guard tapped the control panel and the collar on the alien girl's neck flashed red. She screamed and clawed at the air. The sound was sharp, painful, almost too human. Ethan felt anger rise inside him. They were using her as a weapon. He realized the cruel plan. They wanted to see what happened when a human soldier and a feral hybrid were forced together. Would they fight? Would they kill each other? When the guards left, the jungle fell quiet again. Only the faint hum of the cage remained. The girl crawled toward Ethan, her glowing eyes filled with confusion and rage. Ethan stayed still, raising his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. "I'm not your enemy," he said softly, his voice calm even though fear twisted inside him. She tilted her head, watching his lips move. Then she mimicked the sound. "Enemy?" Her voice was broken, rough, like she had forgotten how to speak. He nodded slowly, shaking his head to make her understand. "No, not enemy." She stared for a long time, then turned away, curling up in the corner. He could see the marks on her back, burns, cuts, and strange glowing lines under her skin. She was suffering not by choice, but by design. Someone had done this to her. Hours passed. The light outside the cage shifted as the alien sun sank behind the thick clouds. Distant roars came from the jungle, deep and echoing. Ethan stayed awake, listening. The girl slept restlessly, twitching and muttering words he could not understand. He began to piece together her condition. Her strength was unnatural, her reactions too fast. She was likely enhanced, part of some hybrid project the aliens were running. But why keep her alive if she was uncontrollable? Maybe she was the only one left. Then something changed. The guards outside started shouting. A loud crash came from beyond the trees, followed by strange screeches. One guard fired his weapon, and bright blue flashes lit the night. Another screamed before being dragged into the dark. Whatever hunted them was not small. The alien girl opened her eyes and sniffed the air. She pulled against her chain, growling softly. Ethan felt the tremor under his feet. The cage's power flickered. Smoke filled the air outside, and one of the guards ran past, blood on his armor. A shadow leapt from the trees and tore him away. Ethan backed up, his heart racing. Then, as if responding to the chaos, the cage door clicked. The red lights on the control panel died. The girl looked at him, her collar still flashing faintly. She did not move. Ethan approached slowly and pressed his hand against the glass door. "It's open," he whispered. "We can go." She tilted her head again, her glowing eyes reflecting the fire outside. For a moment she hesitated, then crawled toward the exit. She sniffed the air like an animal testing freedom. Ethan stepped out first. The jungle smelled of smoke and blood. He turned to see her still inside, frozen. She pointed toward the forest where the screams had stopped. Ethan nodded. "Yes, danger," he said. She watched his face, studying the calm in his eyes. Then, to his surprise, she took a cautious step forward. They stood side by side at the edge of the burning camp. The alien guards were gone, their weapons scattered. In the distance, something huge moved between the trees, too big to be seen clearly. Ethan looked at the alien girl and said, "We need to move." She gave no reply, but when he started walking, she followed. As they disappeared into the glowing jungle, The ruined cage sparked behind them. Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched them go. The experiment had not ended. It had only just begun. The glowing jungle surrounded Ethan and the alien girl like a living maze. Strange flowers hissed when they passed and vines moved as if watching them. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and energy. Ethan limped beside her, still dizzy from the crash, but she moved with effortless grace. Every sound made her ears twitch. Every movement in the shadows drew her eyes. She was wild, untamed, and dangerous, but she had not attacked him again. When they stopped near a waterfall, Ethan sat down, breathing hard. The alien girl crouched nearby, staring at him as if studying a strange animal. She tilted her head when he groaned in pain. For the first time, she seemed curious instead of angry. He pressed his hand against his leg, where a deep wound bled through his torn suit. She crept closer, sniffing the air, then suddenly pressed her palm against his wound. Ethan froze. Her hand glowed faintly and the bleeding slowed. It was not healing, but something in her touch numbed the pain. She whispered a word he could barely understand, something like stay alive. Ethan looked into her eyes, realizing she was not mindless. There was thought behind that gaze. Fear, confusion, and something softer, something almost human. He pointed to himself. Ethan. Then he pointed to her. You? She blinked, unsure. After a moment, she tapped her collar, where faint letters were etched. Lura, Lura, he repeated. The name felt strange, but right. She watched his mouth move as if trying to remember the sound. Then she copied him, awkwardly forming the word, then. It came out broken, but it made him smile. Hours passed as they rested by the water. Ethan tried to patch his suit using torn fabric while Lura hunted nearby. She moved through the jungle like smoke, silent and fast. When she returned, she carried a small glowing creature, dead but still twitching. She dropped it in front of him proudly, expecting him to eat. Ethan shook his head, disgusted. She frowned, confused, and tore into it herself, the blue blood dripping from her chin. When she caught him staring, she wiped it away quickly as if ashamed. As night fell, lightning cracked across the alien sky. They found shelter in a hollow tree large enough for both of them. Rain began to pour and thunder rolled over the mountains. Inside it was dark and damp. Ethan built a small fire from glowing sticks. The light reflected on her skin, highlighting the strange symbols that pulsed faintly along her arms. They looked alive, like veins carrying light instead of blood. She sat near him, her head tilted toward the fire. Her expression softened as if the warmth reminded her of something long forgotten. Ethan spoke quietly, not sure if she understood. They made you a weapon, didn't they? She looked at him, puzzled by the word. Weapon, he repeated, miming a gun. She flinched. Then she pointed at her own chest, shaking her head fiercely. No, weapon. Her voice trembled. It was the first emotion he had heard from her, pain mixed with defiance. He nodded. No, you are not. Lura looked at him for a long time. Then she reached out and touched his wrist. The contact was brief, but enough to make her eyes widen. His warmth seemed to surprise her. She whispered something in her own language, then said softly, warm. Ethan smiled faintly. Yes, warm. She repeated the word again and again, almost like she was learning to speak through feeling. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The tree shook with the wind and lightning illuminated her face. She looked frightened for the first time, pressing closer to the fire. Ethan noticed how she covered her ears every time thunder struck. He handed her his jacket, motioning for her to take it. She hesitated, then slowly wrapped it around herself. The smell of human fabric made her blink in confusion. Safe, Ethan said quietly. You're safe here. For a moment she relaxed. Her eyes softened and she leaned her head against the rough bark, closing her eyes. The firelight flickered across her features, revealing the traces of scars and pain that told her story better than words ever could. Ethan stayed awake, thinking. He remembered the guard's words, experiment. It was clear now. She was part of something terrible. A project combining human and alien DNA to create the ultimate fighter. But something had gone wrong. Maybe she had refused orders. Maybe she had shown emotion instead of obedience. That would have made her a failure to them, but to Ethan, it made her alive. When the storm finally eased, the jungle glowed again, wet and peaceful. Lura stirred, her eyes reflecting the dim light. She looked at Ethan's chest, where his scanner blinked faintly. The pulse of his heart fascinated her. She touched it lightly, feeling the rhythm beneath his skin. Then she whispered his name again, this time without hesitation. Ethan. He looked at her, surprised by how gentle it sounded. For a brief moment there was no fear, no war, no cages, just two lost beings sharing the same silence. Then, in the distance, came the sharp metallic whine of drones. Ethan froze. Lura's ears twitched. The faint red glow above the trees meant only one thing. The hunt had begun again. The scientist knew he was alive. He stood, grabbing what little gear he had left. Lura's eyes darkened. She looked toward the sky, then back at him. Without words, she understood. They had to run. The storm had washed away their tracks, but the machines would find them soon. As they stepped out into the glowing rain, Lura turned to him one last time before disappearing into the trees. She spoke only one word, but it carried more meaning than anything he had heard from her so far. Together. Ethan nodded, tightening his grip on the broken scanner. Together, he said. And then they ran into the night, hunted not only by machines but by a world that refused to let them exist. The morning light of Viralia was unlike any other. It bled through the canopy in silver beams, turning the jungle into a maze of glassy shadows. The rain had stopped, but the ground still steamed with heat. Ethan moved quickly, brushing past vines that pulsed with faint light. Every step felt heavier. The scanner on his wrist blinked red, warning of movement nearby. They were being tracked. Lura led the way, moving on all fours like a predator, her body quiet and her eyes scanning every corner. She had taken on the role of guide without words, her instincts sharper than any human technology. Ethan followed close behind, trusting her path even when it seemed impossible. Through tunnels made of roots, under glowing water streams, across stone ridges that shook with the sound of distant beasts. When they reached a ridge overlooking the valley, Ethan saw them. Drones, sleek black spheres hovering low, scanning the ground with blue light. Dozens of them, each one armed with plasma emitters. Lura crouched beside him, her body tense. Her markings glowed faintly, reacting to their presence. They found us, Ethan whispered. Lura turned her head, her eyes narrowing. Then she grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the cliffs. No fight, she said, struggling to form the words. Hide, Ethan nodded. They climbed down through vines until they reached a cavern hidden behind the waterfall. The sound of rushing water masked their breathing. Ethan pressed his back against the wall, listening as the drones passed overhead. But Lura's body trembled. Her collar flashed again, tiny red sparks running along the metal. She winced, pressing her hand against it. They're tracking you, Ethan realized. That thing around your neck, it's a signal. Lura shook her head, her voice trembling. Cannot remove. Kill if try. She looked terrified, and that fear made Ethan's anger rise. He pulled out his combat knife, the last tool he had left, and studied the collar. The device was built into her skin, a cruel mixture of metal and living tissue. The aliens had made sure she could never be free. He met her gaze. Trust me, he said softly. She hesitated, breathing hard, her eyes filled with doubt. Then slowly she nodded. Ethan slid the blade under the edge of the collar. Lura gasped, clutching the rock to keep from screaming. Sparks burst from the metal as the knife touched a power node. Ethan worked fast, ignoring the pain in his own hands as the electricity burned through him. Almost there, he whispered. One last spark and the collar shattered. Lura fell forward, panting. The device hit the ground, still blinking faintly before going dark. Her eyes glowed brighter now, freed from whatever control they had placed inside her. For a moment she just stared at Ethan, shocked. Then she smiled. A small, fragile smile that carried gratitude deeper than words. But freedom came at a cost. The drones above shifted direction, detecting the sudden loss of signal. The air filled with their mechanical whine. Ethan grabbed her hand. Run! They sprinted through the jungle as blue energy blasts scorched the ground behind them. Trees burst into flames and the air turned to smoke. Lura turned, her markings lighting up. With a scream that echoed like thunder, she unleashed a wave of energy. The drones shattered mid-air, falling like burning stars. The blast cracked the ground and sent Ethan tumbling backward. When he looked up, she was standing in the center of the chaos, surrounded by smoke and light. Her hair floated in the charged air, her skin glowing with lines of gold. She looked both terrifying and beautiful, like something that had broken free from creation itself. Lura, Ethan called. She blinked, dazed. Her body shook as the energy drained from her. Then she collapsed. He ran to her, catching her before she hit the ground. Her breathing was weak and the glow under her skin faded. He carried her deeper into the forest, finding shelter under a large stone arch. The rain began again, washing away the smoke and blood. Hours passed before she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Ethan sat beside her, watching quietly. She reached out weakly, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "You hurt?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No, you saved us." She frowned as if the words confused her. "Why, you saved me." Ethan looked away, searching for the right answer. "Because someone has to." She stared at him, then closed her eyes again, whispering something in her native tongue. Her voice was soft, almost like a prayer. As night returned, Ethan kept watch. He could see more lights moving across the sky, ships searching, scanning, hunting. He knew it was only a matter of time before the soldiers came. But this time he would not hand her over. He owed her that much. When dawn broke, Lura was already awake, standing quietly at the edge of the ridge. She looked stronger, calmer. Her eyes followed the sun as it rose over the misty forest. "Iron Ridge," she said suddenly. "Safe there." Ethan frowned. "You know it?" She nodded. "Old place. Before war, they cannot enter." He understood then. She had been there before. Maybe during her creation, maybe during her escape. Whatever it was their only chance. He stood beside her, looking out over the valley. "Then that's where we go." Lura turned to him, her face unreadable. "They hunt us," he nodded. "Then we make the hunt worth it." In the distance, the forest shimmered with movement. The hunters were close again. Ethan tightened his grip on his knife and took one last breath of the wild, glowing air. Lura's eyes met his, steady and fierce. "Together," she said. He nodded, his voice steady. "Together." Then they vanished into the jungle once more, their shadows blending with the light of a world that wanted neither of them, but would soon remember both. The Iron Ridge rose like a wall against the storm-lit sky. Sharp black peaks cut through the clouds, and the wind screamed through the canyons as if the planet itself wanted to keep intruders away. Ethan and Lura climbed in silence, their bodies bruised and covered in dirt. The journey had been long, 3 days without rest, hunted by drones and patrols that searched every inch of the jungle below. Yet somehow they survived together. She had learned to trust his voice, and he had learned to read her silence. When they reached the top of a narrow ridge, Ethan stopped. His wrist scanner flickered again. Not red this time, but blue. He frowned. That meant something human was nearby. Maybe a distress beacon. Maybe help. He hesitated before turning to Lura. "Someone's out there." Her eyes narrowed. "No trust. I have to check," Ethan said quietly. "If there's a signal, maybe we can call for help." Maybe before he could finish, a low hum filled the air. A blue light swept over the ridge, followed by the unmistakable whine of engines. A ship descended through the clouds, sleek, metallic, and marked with the insignia of the Terran Alliance. Human Ethan's heart pounded as the ship landed. Dust and debris swirled as the side door opened. 5 soldiers stepped out, rifles raised. At their head was a man in dark armor with a scar running down his face. Captain Dross. Ethan knew him well. His old commander, the one who had ordered the first mission to Varelia. "Ward," Dross called out. "You are a hard man to find." Ethan raised his hand slowly. "Captain, you found me." Dross's gaze shifted past him. To Lura. The look in his eyes turned cold. "And I see you found the asset too." Lura stepped back, her glowing eyes flashing with fear. Ethan instinctively moved in front of her. "She's not an asset. She saved my life." Dross chuckled darkly. "Saved you? That thing killed an entire research team, Ward. You think she's some lost child? She's a weapon that went rogue." "She's not a weapon," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "She was made to be one, but she chose not to be." The other soldiers tightened their grip on their rifles. Dross took a step closer. "You've been out here too long, soldier. You don't know what you're saying. Step aside. We'll sedate her and take her in. Command wants her alive for study." Ethan shook his head. "You'll only destroy her again. You'll turn her into what she fought to escape." Dross's expression hardened. "You're disobeying direct orders. This is your last warning." Lura growled lowly, sensing the tension. The symbols on her skin flickered and her body tensed like a cornered animal. Ethan could feel the air heating up around her. "Lura, no," he whispered. "Don't." Dross noticed it too. "She's losing control." "Stand down, Ward." Ethan didn't move. His hand brushed against Laura's arm, trying to calm her. "Trust me," he whispered. "Please." The captain raised his weapon. "Enough!" The sound of the plasma rifle echoed like thunder. Ethan didn't think, he just moved. The blast hit his shoulder, throwing him backward into Laura's arms. Pain tore through his body, but he stayed conscious long enough to see the horror on her face. Laura screamed, a sound like shattering glass and lightning. Her markings exploded with golden light. The energy that burst from her body sent shockwaves through the air, hurling soldiers into the rocks. The ground split open and the sky lit up like fire. Ethan tried to reach for her, but the light blinded him. When it finally faded, silence fell over the ridge. Smoke and dust drifted through the air. The soldiers were gone, some scattered, some motionless. Dross lay pinned beneath the wreckage of a broken drone, staring at her in disbelief. Ethan coughed, struggling to rise. "Laura," she turned to him slowly. Her eyes glowed bright gold, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You hurt," she said softly. He nodded weakly. "Just a scratch." Her gaze shifted to Dross. The man was still alive, barely. He reached for his pistol, but she stopped him with a glance. For the first time, Ethan saw mercy in her expression. She could have killed him, but she didn't. Instead, she turned away. Ethan reached out and grabbed her hand. "We have to go," he said. "More will come." Laura looked back at the fire, her face pale in the glow. "You saved me." "I save you," she whispered. Then gently, she lifted him onto her shoulder with surprising strength. They moved down the ridge together, leaving behind the broken ship and the soldiers. Every step hurt, but Ethan didn't let go of her hand. Hours later, they stopped in a hidden valley filled with silver mist. Ethan sat on a rock, his arm bandaged with scraps of his uniform. Laura sat close, watching him silently. He looked at her and said, "You could have killed them all." She shook her head. "No kill, no cage." Ethan smiled faintly. "You're stronger than any of us." She tilted her head. "Stronger. With you." He didn't reply, but the warmth in her words settled deep inside him. He knew now what he had done. He had betrayed his own people. But in doing so, he had found something more powerful than orders or duty. He had found trust. As night fell, Laura looked toward the horizon where the ridge glowed faintly under the alien stars. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "Iron Ridge," Ethan nodded. "Tomorrow." Neither of them noticed the blinking red light hidden in the rubble miles away. Dross's broken communicator still pulsed faintly, sending one final signal into the sky, marking their location. The hunt was far from over. The dawn came slowly over Virelia, painting the Iron Ridge in muted gold. The mountains stood like titans, their shadows crawling across the fog-covered valley. Ethan awoke to the faint hum of the wind moving through the canyons. His body ached, his arm wrapped tightly in Laura's improvised bandage made from her own torn clothing. She sat nearby, quiet, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the ridge met the clouds. She had not slept. She never did. "Are we close?" he asked softly. Laura nodded without looking at him. "There," she whispered, pointing to a narrow crack between two cliffs. Past that, safe, Ethan followed her gaze. Between the rocks, faint lights shimmered, moving like reflections on water. He frowned. "What is it?" "Old world," she said. "Human. Before." Her words confused him. He had thought the Terran forces never settled this deep into alien territory. But as they descended into the canyon, he began to see it. The ruins of an ancient base half buried beneath vines and stone. Rusted metal, shattered windows, and faded insignias of the Terran Alliance covered the broken walls. Laura stopped at the entrance. Her eyes dimmed. "I was born here," she said quietly. "They made me here." Ethan looked at her, stunned. "This is the lab?" She nodded. "They call it Genesis Point." He stepped closer, touching the cold metal of the ruined gate. "So this is where it started," he murmured. "The experiments. The cages." Laura's expression was unreadable. No cages now. They moved inside. The interior was filled with silence, broken only by the dripping of water through cracks in the ceiling. Strange pods lined the walls, empty glass chambers connected by dead wires. Ethan brushed dust from one of the pods and saw a faint handprint inside, smaller than his own. He realized with a chill that it was hers. Laura stood beside him, staring at her reflection. "They said I was failure," she whispered. "Too human. Too weak." Ethan turned to her. "They were wrong." She met his eyes. "Then why you fight for them?" He hesitated. The question cut deep. Because I believed we were protecting humanity, he said. But I never asked who we were protecting it from. A low rumble shook the floor beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ethan raised his scanner. The red signal pulsed again. They're here, he said. Lura's eyes flashed. No run. And now. Ethan wanted to tell her there was always another way, but before he could speak, the sound of engines filled the air. Outside, dropships descended like dark birds. Human soldiers poured out, their armor shining under the alien sun. At their center stood Captain Dross, his face burned and scarred from the explosion. He limped forward, his rifle raised. Ethan Ward, his voice boomed through a loudspeaker. You have one chance. Step away from the hybrid and surrender. You're under arrest for treason against the Terran Alliance. Ethan stood at the doorway, his heart pounding. He knew there was no escape now. Behind him, Lura's markings began to glow faintly. She looked at him and said, I can stop them. He shook his head. Not like that. If you fight, they'll only prove themselves right about you. She stared at him, struggling to understand. They never stop. Then we make them see. He took a step forward, his hands raised, calling out, Dross, listen to me. She's not what you think, Dross sneered. I've heard enough of your nonsense. Step aside. Lura moved past Ethan, standing in the open. The light from her body intensified, gold veins glowing under her skin. The soldiers hesitated, lowering their rifles slightly. She looked at them all, not with anger but with sadness. No more cages, she said, her voice echoing through the canyon. Ethan watched as the light spread from her feet into the ground. The air vibrated. Every metal surface began to hum. The soldiers looked around in fear, but she was not attacking. She was changing something. The ruined base, the machines, even the earth itself began to pulse with life. Flowers grew from cracks in the metal. The air warmed. Dross shouted, Fire! But before they could shoot, the guns melted in their hands. The energy around them disarmed the weapons, turning steel into dust. Ethan stepped forward, shielding her instinctively, though he realized she no longer needed protection. Dross staggered backward. What are you? He gasped. Lura looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter. Free. The energy faded as quickly as it had come. The air stilled. The soldiers stood in stunned silence. Dross collapsed to his knees, his weapon useless. Ethan reached for Lura's arm, steadying her as her glow dimmed. She looked exhausted but calm. The soldiers didn't move. For the first time, they saw her not as a monster but as something else, something they couldn't understand. Dross finally spoke, his voice trembling. What now, Ward? You think you can hide her forever? Ethan looked down at him. I'm not hiding her. I'm helping her live. He turned to Lura. You don't have to run anymore. She looked at him, confused but hopeful. Home? Ethan smiled faintly. Wherever we go together, that's home. They walked away from the ridge, leaving the broken soldiers behind. The wind carried the faint sound of their footsteps fading into the distance. Above them, the sky opened, no longer stormy but bright with the pale light of a new day. As they reached the edge of the valley, Lura paused and looked back one last time. The old world lay in ruins, the past buried beneath stone and regret. She took Ethan's hand, her voice soft. No cage, she whispered again. He nodded. Never again. Far above, a human battleship hovered silently, observing everything below. Inside, unseen commanders watched the live feed from Dross's broken helmet, their screens flickering with images of Lura's final act. No one spoke. Somewhere deep within the control room, a single order was logged. Do not engage. Unknown potential. Observe and learn. The story of a wild alien girl and a defiant human soldier had begun as an experiment. But in the ashes of betrayal and war, it had become something else. Proof that trust, once found, could change the very laws of the galaxy.